and where we're going to see the relationship between the square and the octagon. That's going to be the central intention. We're going to try and take advantage of this perceived relationship between the octagon and the square. So again, it's an eightfold kind of day. So we're going to start by folding our paper on the diagonal line in order to get a square. So first step, get a square. Now, the octagon is one of those things that is very infinite. In the same way a pentagon could be infinite, an octagon can be infinite. It just has a very irrational way of compounding and nesting forevermore within. Almost never ending. So, you know, it provides this sort of world for us, this whole universe within its borders and rules. And one of the advantages of looking at things as though they're numbers is that we get to see more patterns. And then we get to use our eyes and we get to see even more patterns. We combine what we see with what we understand. And so if we take the polygons by the number of sides they have, I mean, calling them by how many sides it has, so the octagon would be an 8, the square would be a 4, the triangle would be a 3, hexagon would be a 6. There's a tessellation of hexagons and triangles. It's a pretty basic Archimedean tiling, right? So we're going to do an octagon at the center. So we need an 8-fold division at the center. So that means that we start by folding it like the other diagonal as well. So, okay, so there's the Archimedean tilings. The Archimedean tilings are a great source of inspiration for basic structures which could, again, be compounded or used in ways unexpected. Both diagonals, and then we fold this in half like so. I'm gonna see if I can get more of an angle on my camera because sort of having to push forward my hands a little bit too much. There we go. Yeah, much better, much better. Should start like this. Okay, so we understand the octagon is an 8, the square is a 4, triangle is 3, hexagon is 6. Okay, so we have sort of an 8-fold division pretty much, but we need one more thing in order to do it properly as an 8-fold, and that is a line that goes between each of these slices. So all these, as of now, are in the same state. All of them are mountains, and so we could do the double mountain technique. And then we select 2 mountains, like so. That's the intersection point. We can hold that, and then we sort of put our finger between the 2 mountains. Do it on both sides here. Sometimes we do it on one side, but this time we're doing it on both. So make sure that the fold that we're going to do, the line is going to go through it, will also go through the center. Therefore, this line connects, and over here this line connects. So that's one way to do it. The advantage of this way is that we also get to have sort of like a back and forth. Right? You go mountain, valley, mountain, and it looks really good. One way of doing it. The other way of doing it is sort of knowing that these 2 lines are going to match with themselves. So when we fold them, we see how we're going through the center. This line is matching, and so is this line matching. So we get to have 3 incidences. Incidence 1, this line. Incidence 2, this other line. Incidence 3, the center. Now, the center should be a consequence of these 2 lines matching. I know that perhaps I need to bring down the curtain because my paper's getting burned from the light. There we go. So I'm going to stick to the second method of matching these two lines. So if these two lines match, center is a consequence of it. So we need to do this 4 times. Also, we need to be careful that it works. So if we do this properly, you're going to see this familiar shape here. Does this strike you as similar? As familiar? Well, it's half of an 8 2-star. Right? It's half of an octagram. If we had another piece of paper that's folded like this, we just put it and we get to see the octagram. Okay. So the kind of relationship we want to do is pretty quote unquote basic. We want to establish some channels, and those channels are going to have some information on them. That information is going to be related to how it's going to sort of collapse and come down. So we're going to have the center be the main character. So our center is going to be an octagon. So we just need to establish where our channels is going. So I'm going to set up the channels in such a way they're going to be opposite to whatever line I choose. Now, the advantage of also going for symmetrical and beautiful things like these is that we couldn't have it be either on this line, these sort of 8 mountain lines we have, or we could turn the paper over and use these mountain lines as where our channels are going to be. So we do have that option. I'm going to use the ones that are sort of more aligned to my edges. So with that in mind, I take my corner and put it up. Sorry, the diagonal. Diagonal first. I'm going to fold where this line right here, this line matches to that one. So on both sides, right? And you can see that this one is also matching to that one. So we have this one matching, we have that one matching. 1, 2, 1, 2. So we do these on all 4, sort of getting them one by one of the established one by one. So now that I have those 4, now it's just to establish the other channels. Now I'm going to have to take advantage of the fact that there are going to be several intersections. So it's going to be these 2 points that I can keep an eye out on. Here, 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 and here. So a line is going to go through there, make a square. Bah, bah, bah. All these 4, and they're going to make a square. So now I go through that one. So here I am sort of just looking at where my line is intersecting in order for my line to go through those 2 points. And also, yeah, these 2 on the sides as well. So it should look a little something like this. Now what we want is sort of to catapult ourselves using these 8 channels. Sorry, 4 channels. So it's 1, 2, 3, and 4. Now we've seen how to make twists before, right? So the way it needs to work is that because we're going to use this center one, well, there's several ways we could go about it. One is that way in the twisting, using the channels in order to get the relationship we want, sort of like also to get around it, or we could do the corner technique. Now the corner technique is great for twists, but in a different kind of matter, but it does sort of solve for a lot of the lines we need. Now a lot of the lines we need are going to be just nested polygons, so that's also that. But see, I'm more keen sometimes on using the, what's the name of it? The corner technique. But no, because of what I was talking about we were doing, we're trying to find the relationship, or rather take advantage of the relationship between octagons and squares. So that's the sort of family we're working with right now. So let's take advantage of that. We have the octagon, and now we're going to put in some squares in here. Now, because of the way that nature is, we get to choose where our squares are going to go. We can't have them be on all sides. We have only 4s to choose. So we're going to do this channel within, but it's not at the half point, right? It's at those corner points. So the points that we circled before. We get a line right between those. Now a lot of lines, but we only get to do the channel. So on there and here underneath as well. These 2 and these 2. And so because we have diagonal lines sort of coming in there as a cross, we see where there's a square, because this is going to be that sort of same division of a square. So it's almost as if we extended these lines. Now we just need to fold.
Just a second.
Yeah.
Yeah. What's the next?
Now we're going to take into account the limits that space imposes on us. So as much as we would like to put in more squares here on these 4, we're not. We're sort of going to be limiting ourselves to what space allows. And space allows for only octagon, square, and then octagon here. And that's the sort of sequence that we're going to get. And then we're going to try and find the twist within each of these squares, and sort of twist around that and sort of take advantage of whatever happens to this octagon and sort of then try to relate everything to it. But these squares are going to be sort of like the main characters, to a certain extent, very important characters to our story. But for now, as you can see, the line I've drawn stops where it hits this edge line of the octagon that extends. Hits there, that's where I stop. So we only marked 2 channels, 1 channel, 2 channel, not the 4. Now, once we have these 2 channels marked, 1 and 2, on these points, on these vertices of the octagon, now thanks to the cross, we get to draw a line where that cross happens. So we need to draw that cross in. Now I thought it was going to line up to the edge of that little square there, but apparently it's not. It's just a little underneath it. Now again, based on these sort of cross lines, we get also to appreciate where the next edges of our octagons are going to be at. They will hit all these lines that we're drawing in. So get to finish off these squares. I think that's like the most important part of it so far. Now, these squares are going to need a little more lines going through them. I know it might be a little like overwhelming, but we do need a line that goes right between this square. We do need that line. Why? Because we need a channel. We need a channel going through that square, because that square is going to be a twist. That's sort of like the system we're sort of putting onto our pattern depends upon these squares. So these squares are going to be related to each other and sort of taking advantage of this tessellation we're constructing. Now, there's 2 ways we could go about it. We could finish the construction of the pattern of the tessellation and then add whatever remaining lines we need for the squares. So, all right, let's do it that way. Let's do it where the square gets to wait. We're just going to have to finish constructing our tessellation. So, where this line hits, we get to draw another line there at the connection. So again, we mind our decisions. Now, there's going to be one of these that's just going to be very symmetrical. It has to be. And so I think we found it. This one actually matches to the center. One of the things about origami tessellations and corrugations is the patience required. I'm not talking about the patience to fold. I'm talking about the patience to fold everything before you get to do whatever it is you're going to do to it. Because once you get the sight, once you get to see what's happening, then it's very difficult to not just go on impulse and just fold the thing that you know is going to be there. Sort of like the waiting around sometimes is the most difficult part of it. Okay, so this construction has given us another edge to our octagons. Now we need the line that crosses between these 2 points, right? We see this little square here, another main character. You also get to appreciate the same sort of weave that was inside of this octagon, see? And we can even appreciate, though, that because of the width of these squares, we get to even have a smaller square happening here. You get to have that. So all of these are going to have these squares within. So it's almost as if we have this sort of sequence of big squares, little squares, big squares, and these rectangles. So it's a very beautiful tessellation we're constructing. And now we get just the diagonal line right there.
Which diagonal? Just
Oh yeah, the one that crosses right between this little square. These 2 points. Now, because we're working with something that's irrational, it wouldn't surprise me at all if, like, for instance, there, that corner, it wouldn't surprise me that it does not hit the vertex of that square. It does not surprise me that it doesn't. And it doesn't surprise me because there's an irrational relationship. So it's expected that something weird was going to happen. Or not weird, but something like out of the conventional. So not everything is so symmetrical, although it is, because we do see that one goes over, but we get these two get to be on a channel. So there is that. I mean, it's not a complete loss. It's not completely crazy. So this is what I'm basing off of right now. I'm just basing off of these lines matching. So in a weird way, what we're constructing is very similar to constructing a grid for the triangle and hexagon tessellations. It might not seem like it. Well, no, it does look like it. Only on virtue of the fact that it is a tessellation. So now we've completed that octagon, and we get to see that this also is going to rise and hit on where the diagonals there are. We stop. And I'll get 2 of them. Two over here. And so the sequence continues. Now we get to finish off this square, so where these lines are matching with our edges. We fold that line now. It's going to give us this new set of squares, so more squares for us. What's also cool is that there's another pattern sort of hiding inside of it, like the same pattern, but it's on the other side. See, I'm going to quickly turn it over just to show you what I mean. So instead of having my octagon be at the center here, now this might be a little confusing, so I should wait until the end, but I'm not. I'm just going to show you real quick what I mean. So instead of having the octagon at the center, I'm going to put this square, which I've established is the same as the other squares. And now the advantage to this is that we also get to have the same sort of pattern. So it's an interesting kind of dual where the same lines are producing the same pattern, but like, inverted a little bit. Now we still have to put in this cross here in order to get this line, which I think we are going to fold that in a little bit, but I'm going to sort of advance there a little bit. So this is very interesting in how the pattern is pretty much shifted with itself. So instead of having the same pattern, just different selection. Interesting, no? So again, we're looking at this side, we complete these squares. Again, not matching to any edge or nothing. Simply at the intersections. Now, usually what happens with origami instructions is that they will tell you, like, do these many divisions, and on this point do this, and at this point do that. But I think there is some merit to understanding a motif better than it is to sort of just follow instructions to getting that particular set. Now, for instance, on the drop, the pattern that I was showing you, that's more of a 3D object. Of course, that you might need some guidance as to how to get that shape, but with these kinds of things where it's more of a geometrical approach and like this construction approach, it's best to understand what paper can do in order to use it as a tool, so you know sort of how to follow along the line. So it is useful for these kind of geometrical constructions to get a little pencil out like we're doing now and actually constructing these lines. Now, also worth noting is that the diagonal of this square has the same unit length as this. So it's unit length. So it's almost the inverse of a square root of 2. That's what it is actually. It's the inverse of a square root of 2. That's what this edge is. Right? I think so. Because, well, that's what the diagonal of a square is. How you doing with your construction, Sashi?
Yeah, I'm doing it, I think.
Cool. So as you can see, we're almost done. Again, we get to see this octagon be unfinished there. We just have to cut it out. So last bit, just getting these. Now I am aware there's going to be a little bit like, and I'm talking like a little bit of leftover. And as you can see, like the intersection is not going to be exactly at the edge. Rather, it's going to have like a super small leftover here. Super small. You can see that it's not even, it's so negligible. So what we're going to do is we're going to simply focus on these divisions. On this octagon, we have the very edge, and that's going to be the stopping point. This. Now we're going to have the construction happen. Sorry, the construction, the mechanism be applied. So, you know, we constructed the 8, 8, 4, 8, 8, 4 around the single vertex. We have that. Now we're going to have the squares be our main characters. Now we see this a lot in the Islamic geometry kind of world. We can take a polygonal tessellation like this and decorate each of these with a different star and have them be sort of connecting, these sort of matching with that. So we're going to do that same kind of approach, but we're going to do it with origami. And so for that, we're going to need a channel that goes right between each of these squares, the outer squares, of course. So these squares are going to be the main characters. So we have, so for instance, for this one, we do have this line, right? We do have this line, which when we take away, we connect these two octagons and we create this sort of irregular hexagon there, which is interesting. It's interesting. But just as much as we take away that channel, we need a channel that goes through these. So we have these two, but we don't have the line that goes between. So we simply just take our points, we put them together, and I match them, and then I can just fold that, make sure that it's going through the center. Apparently this one is sort of matching on my edges here. That makes sense. Being a mirror image.
Could you please repeat the last step because I missed it?
Sure. So what I'm doing now is simply establishing a channel for each of these squares, right? So by a channel, we need 3 lines. We need the spinal cord, spinal line, sort of like the line that goes on top of this mountain, and the 2 valleys on the side of it, the circuit lines.
Yep.
So for this one, for instance, I'm missing the mountain that goes between. So I can just simply either turn it over almost and do the double mountain trick, in that I know the line is going to go between them, or simply just try to keep like an eye out and connect them like so. And sort of see that it goes through the point that I need. And apparently it does hit one of our lines from the pattern. So it does hit there apparently. Well, no, it doesn't actually. It seems to. It's very, very close. It's one of those things, I guess. Yeah, very, very close, but does not really hit a line. So I think it might be better to approach it from the double mountain technique, or simply through, you know, sort of connecting the points. So this is pretty much what we're trying to get at, having these sort of rippling effects happen, where we can sort of squeeze on these. And so we need to do them for all the squares that we've established here. So I'm missing these 2 on this side and then these 2 on the other side to get these 9 centers of 8 sort of be. Right, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Sort of outer ring octagons. Well, I'm not counting. I don't know why I'm not counting these though. I guess I'm seeing them in negative space, but I shouldn't. I mean, so 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. So 13 octagons so far. Okay, so we've established that it's that. So I'm going to apply the double mountain technique for this one. Sort of turn it over. Get 2 mountains and then run my fingers between. As you can see, I run my fingers all the way between, just to get that established, and then boom. So as I connect these 2 mountains, I find the you know, the valley between. And I call it a valley because that's why I turn my paper over. because on the side that I'm working on, they are valleys, but it's inner over and they're mountains. Okay, almost done, almost done. So what we're doing with all this work is pretty much just taking a turn from the usual grid in order to construct any corrugation or tessellation. We're using something which is more related to something, not irregular, but more irrational in a way. But at the same time, this is very classical, right? Just octagons and squares is like canonical. You know, the oldest of the old. This is just too, it's been done to death, is what I mean. But that's good. I mean, that's fine. I need to find all my squares and just put a line between them. The thing is, like, this sort of grid is rarely used in origami because of how much work. I think it's because of the work that it would take to fold it, and also because we get to have every effect that we need by doing other things. Just by having a grid of pure squares or pure hexagons or pure triangles. In a way, it's easier, but this sort of grid or construction requires a little bit more of a geometrical effort, even though it's pretty basic and simple. I mean, as you saw, we only needed one single 8-fold division, which is pretty simple to do, and then it's just a matter of establishing sort of a limitation to it, something that's sort of pleasant and also has a lot of space left over in order to do something that's nice, because if you have too little of an effect, then, you know, it's not as satisfying once we get to apply the effects on them. Now, there's a bunch of things that we could do. So we're going to do first what's the most obvious. I feel that that's a great place to start. The obvious. So what is the obvious? The obvious is having the squares be twists and then having sort of them connect to each other by twists. That to me is the most obvious. And of course, we're going to have like another square here with a twist because it's going to go here and here. Right? So there's going to be like this whole thing happening. So it's going to be pretty great. So which should we twist first? Let's twist this guy first. Considering that we are starting from this, we could, again, as I said before, we could establish this to be sort of like the grid that we use, right? We could, in theory, use the same sort of effect on the other side and we still get something out of it. But, you know, we still need some lines in order to get it properly, so we're not going to bother with that for now. But it is an interesting thing how the pattern contains a pattern, contains itself, just sort of shift it. Yeah. Actually, I'm looking at it now. It looks very, very interesting. I'm now thinking that, wouldn't it be cool if instead of doing the big squares, we did the little squares as the twists? It would require a lot more work, but, you know, it's something that gets you thinking, like, would that look different? So in order to do a twist, we need this sort of like valley crossover. So notice how it's going. My spinal lines are mountains, and then the diagonal lines here are valleys. So mountains and the valleys between. So that allows for me to sort of like squish it like this, like a dart almost. Once I have this squished, I can then sort of do to my sides almost. So I can take this and then sort of, they all go to my right, for instance. And so now this little twist here that happens, we can simply just take the 4 corners here and then just squish. And just establish a little button there. Now, because the channel is activated, and so it's going on toward my next point, my next square. The next square is over here. So I can find that point and where the square is, I can simply push, and then I'm activating the channel that goes across it. And now I have to respect the effect that's in place. So this effect in place is going like to my right now, right? Because this guy is falling up here, right? So if I follow that one to here, that means that this one's gonna, they'll have to keep the same direction. And then we repeat this button pressing thing. Now again, this is the basic of the basic. We're just simply taking something that's known, something that we know how it works, and then applying it, doing some origami tricks to sort of something that's, you know, known to us. But as we do it, more things are going to happen as we do it, because we're going to see. So first off is applying it to all the squares, right? Now, because of the nature of this pattern, yeah, you're going to see what I mean. By the way, we could, just as this pattern we could simply take now these intersections and just simply draw on them and get an Islamic pattern from it. We could. Now here's the thing. Because this line is also going to be used, I mean, that's also a square, right? That's what we established, that this was also going to be sort of twisting. So now we have an option here. We could do a double twist. So now it does have enough space for this to work as its own channel. So it's like a two-layer channel thing, right? So we could establish these, for instance. So now there's two systems of channels that's happening, and one requires the other. Now it would be interesting to sort of figure out how to combine them, or like maybe find the order in which, like, also we could play around with the order in which they come down, because when we take one down, then the others sort of, you know, they don't suffer, but they do sort of get taken away from us. So for instance, now it's this guy's turn over here. And we know that these layers are going to be falling on top of it, so respect those layers. Now we could like leave those sort of between and under. What's interesting though is that we have this on the other side, well, as you can see, sort of a very ordered sort of result. Now it's very interesting how we have two layers or two systems of weaves happening simultaneously and without sort of no big or noticeable interruptions. Simply like both of them are doing their own thing. Now to combine them, that would be the interesting part, and I think it can be done. Pretty much like using other origami methods where we sort of take the points we want to connect and just draw a line in between, and then the other would be sort of a consequence of that line. But for now, I think this is a good exercise. I think that this is going to leave us with a lot of things to think about, especially relating to how sort of we have to imagine which channels are going to be respected, sort of almost like So as we take away, should I leave this like the whole thing overlapped, or should some layer be undone? You know, like those kinds of questions are gonna come up, and they are relevant questions. Like which one is first? You know, because if we do fold the weave with this one tucked in, it will alter our results. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna unfold these two that I did here in order to properly do the first system. Although it is interesting, and now this is sort of like the cowardly me, sort of like wanting to like, oh wait, hold on, I'm not sure what's happening. But it is interesting how, yeah, it is pretty interesting how it's some overlays, you know, like the whole system changes. Although not even, I mean, you get the same results. It's just a matter of different sort of arrangements of that result.
See,
How are you doing,
deciding
Sasha?
the direction is an issue.
Huh?
Deciding the direction is an issue.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, is there
Well,
any specific reference
it's
or
always a consequence. So you can just choose once and then everything else will just fall into place. So you
not in
only
the,
you only
see
need to choose
in
one.
the other direction, like between these four, which are on falling on the same thing.
Between which?
Hey, between these four, this square,
Let me see.
which is on the other side, is it?
Huh, I forgot to hit unpause on the recording here. So I unfolded the whole thing. I unfolded the whole thing. I don't know. Yeah, I think I did finish. But now I'm going to try and play around with the twisting order. Also noting how there's another square within. But see, the reason why I'm hesitant to use this with the rest of the sequence. Okay, so if this one's going to my right, then this one's would go to my left. Actually, it would kind of make sense to use all of them, to use all the squares almost. I just need some more lines though.
See, I'm not opening mine. No way.
Huh?
I will just see because I don't want to open mine.
Yeah. No, it actually took a lot of effort to sort of unfold it without breaking it. So I'm going to take advantage of the sort of like the little guys, the other squares inside, almost like the other pattern on the other side. So you know what? You know, you've been following along, so I'm just going to go ahead and sort of ruin this. No, I'm going to use another color, so I don't ruin it too bad. That's such a similar color. Let's see. So these squares that I'm sort of highlighting are going to also be used for my twisting. But now what I'm going to do is sort of establish these as the sort of the main character, because now with this one available, we don't need to, how do you say? Yeah, I'm going to need some lines though. Some lines are here missing. So with this sequence, with this one, we can establish sort of one single layer on it. We don't need sort of like the double twisting and like all that compounding, because when we twist this one, we can then twist all the rest of it, and it will sort of be like this interchange. So 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. So it will allow for a single layer to happen. So we just need to establish some lines in between. This will help us. I mean, it's not strictly needed, but it definitely will help us. And also, you know, just to keep with the spirit of the thing. All right. So one last one over here. on these 4, so that's 2. Here center, that's 3. And finally over here, that would be 4. So I'm lining it up also to these channels falling on themselves. Okay. So I can select these now. These go down, these go down. So I think it's very beautiful the way this sort of like octagons and squares sort of connect and overlap. Very beautiful sequence of duals. Self-duality kind of thing. And this kind of effect also happens in the triangles and hexagons tessellation. So this is what I mean by them having this sort of relationship, or not relationship, rather, that they can produce similar effects, is what I mean. Okay, so I have it all limited to this grid. Now, I'm going to call these gray guys my main characters, if you will. Okay, one last line. Okay. So I'm going to twist this guy. And see what that does is that it allows me then to use the pink ones as well. So now the pink one can interact with this gray one. And that way, all the pink ones can interact with themselves with this sort of bridge between them. So the gray one acts as a bridge. Because now the gray one can allow for the other pink one to connect as well. Well, no, the side-by-side pink, that was established already. Oh, other side. There we go. So these two are already connected, but now what we can do is sort of, thanks to this gray one, see, also interesting is that when you want to sort of bring out the channel, we have to take all the channel lines. We can't just take a single one. You have to take them all at once almost. So as you can see, same sort of the back weave that we had where we established that it was just these sort of squares here. Now, also an advantage is that we get to have regular octagons happening, which is not something that you usually get. You know, usually when you open these up, these are not regular. But in this case, they are. So that's also an advantage to this. So, I mean, just as well, you could imagine that you use this grid as your basis for Hydrogena, all that stuff that's very popular on the Instagrams and whatnot. So instead of using a square grid, you use this octagon and square grid, and by virtue of this grid, you get access to sort of other nice square relationships. So it's a very powerful tool, I believe. So it also could, if you're already familiar with the tessellation game and all that, you know, or like the twist game, or you know, any sort of like square grid game, this is a way to up your game a little bit. So just as much as we saw how the pattern could be interpreted as a double system, or rather like these two layers of grids, we could also use a dual layer of this pattern to establish some sort of like now an actually sort of classically comprehensible weave. And as we do so, the advantage is that when we open these up like so, the shape we get inside is actually a regular octagon. Now the disadvantage though is that when we do that and we try to open up the one next to it, these unfortunately will not line up in such a way that we sort of could, by virtue of them sort of touching there, just make the same pattern but now with a twist. Nothing is that perfect. It would be interesting to sort of reverse engineer that end game, that desired result. How you doing, Sashi?
I'm not folding right now because I didn't want to open this. So
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
just, mm. So
Well,
it looks nice and it's getting late.
yeah.
So
What do you think of the grid?
see, this grid is not equidistant. And then all these lines, there is some difference. We cannot make a grid and then like a square grid.
Yeah.
It's not a square grid, is it?
No.
Okay.
No, but it is a sort of the octagon square. So there are squares, and that's the interesting thing. Sort of like we're adding a new character to a square grid. Usually, the square grid is simply, you know, just squares,
Mm-hmm.
and now we're adding the octagon as like a character that can join the game.
Mm-hmm.
And so by the abilities that the octagon has, we get to sort of find new relationships. And we can take something that is familiar and make it, you know, unfamiliar, or make it new.
I will have to do it from the recording. Because
Yeah?
I will have to finish it with your recordings.
Yeah. Well, also, I'm curious as to see how this could be translated into like a hydrogen or something like that, like using the space between the
Hydrangea, you mean
squares.
to say?
I think I mean, it is entirely possible. Just as much as we twist, I mean, we could just reinterpret the twist as, you know, just as being as more as a standalone kind of thing. So this system of grid could be used extensively for many, many things. So in a way, I mean, this is just sort of like the beginning to it. So, you know, very exciting just to think of the possibilities almost. So I'm going to stop here for now, just to end of the session.
Yeah.
And I want to thank you all for joining us and hope you enjoyed it. I will correct these and sort of see how to fix it or how to make it proper. And until next time, you know, we'll probably do another pattern on Friday, but we will down the line look at this pattern once again and do the proper way. We'll figure it out and we'll do it proper.
Thank you.
Well, thank you, Sashi, for joining
Bye.
us. Bye. Take
Bye.
care now. Let's see here. So pretty much I'm just establishing all this just to get a nice screenshot of the thing. Now, I hope that people who are more wary of details and know and notice that, you know what, this is wrong. There's a mistake here. Yeah, there is. But if you saw the session, then I hope you can understand and forgive me for doing a brug. That's what I'm going to call it when I teach you a wrong pattern. I'm going to do a brug. Take that, brug. I've never met the guy, man. I had nothing against him. Actually, one of the first patterns I folded was one of his, and it was wrong. That's what I was also like, almost frustrating to an extent. Like I did, I was so proud. I actually posted it on Instagram, like, oh, look at me. And then I'm like analyzing it later. I'm like, wait a minute, like this is clearly wrong. This is clearly mistaken. These don't make sense. What is this shape? And yeah, I'm going to send him a message. He's probably just going to say like, whatever. So I'm not even going to bother. Because, you know, some people are just married to their stuff. So, you know what? I'm going to pause the recording. I'm going to finish this, and then I'm going to take the screenshot, and then that'll be it for today. All right, so not only did I finish folding the thing, I also started playing around with it. I got hypnotized, lost in it. So here's some interesting factoids here. These, when popped, well, first off, before I show you this effect on the back, which is quite fascinating, I want to establish that this is a regular octagon. Is it though? I don't know. Seems like it, but I don't know. It really does look like it. It would make sense that, you know, being that everything else is an octagon. So pin on that. Wait, can we prove this somehow? Yeah, we could simply take the edge and we could match it. Well, yeah, it's just without destroying the integrity of the thing. All right, so it doesn't seem, no, it's not a regular octagon. For whatever reason, this is not a regular octagon. It looks like it though, but look at this. If you pop these, sort of like give a little height, you know, make those valleys, make the rest of it mountains, you pop them, these perfectly touch. That's interesting. That's interesting. Now, these on the bottom here, they do also have the thing where they sort of like want to overlap. You know, one of them has to be winning, one of them has to be on top. But here's the cool part. When you turn it over, you get to have like this cavity thing. Now, what's really cool is that you get to have the cavity thing, but it's all squares. See? You get to look inside as well, which is kind of cool. You get to have these. So if we continue the sequence, you know, we get to do this thing. I like that these sort of touch. These want to touch at least. I like the cavity thing on this. So this is pretty neat. Sort of like a nice 3D effect on this. Now, we could apply the same sort of basket weave mentality that we did for that basket weave thing. But it is interesting how this grid of squares and octagons can produce such an interesting sort of phenomenon. So I'll probably look between my takes, see what else comes up. Now, there has to be a way to play with this even more. There's always a way to play with things even more. Sort of a reinterpretation of the theme, a variation on the theme, as they call it in music, a variation on the theme. So for instance, instead of having one side by side, what if we chose, what's going on with this guy? There we go. Everything in its right place. Okay, so what if we chose something that's sort of almost like next to it? How would that pop? How would that fit in with the rest of the thing? If at all. But that would be interesting, no? I mean, the fact whether this sort of relationship with the... That's pretty cool. Now, it is taking a lot of effort from my part, at least on the inside. Not a lot of effort, but it is precise effort. Let's see now. Look at those two sort of connecting there. Isn't that cool? How would that look on the other side, though? This is pretty cool, the way sort of like they line up and touch. Now we have like this checkerboard sequence. So that's pretty cool. I don't know what other sequence, what other secret. So yeah, we should finish this. See how many we can put into this thing. So the next one is here. No, is it there? Oh yeah, has to be there. Otherwise it's sort of underneath. No, it has to be this one. No, it's not. No, no, it is. It is. It is. That's so cool. Now, I would theorize that if we did this on a square grid and like with square divisions, this wouldn't look as cool. That's just my 2 cents on the matter. Now here I'm just making sure that this is lining up proper. I've never seen this before. I don't know if this is a thing, but it is pretty cool. I get to have a checkerboard sequence on the back popping. Let's see, I think we can put in one more. I think this will allow for us one more. Yeah, I think we need higher resolution to go either way now. I think this is the maximum amount of pops we can do for this particular resolution. Interesting to note is that none of these are centers. You can see that the crosses changes color, so it's not a cross at the center. That's interesting, I think. We have to have a nice checkerboard elimination. Actually, there is a curve to this, which means that these are not like perfectly sort of matching to each other. Would have been nice. Wait, can we do one more? Oh, yes, we can. We can do one more. Actually, two more. Yeah, so clearly these four are not matching, but there is enough space for them to like actually coexist. So interesting enough. Also, it might be a way to actually take the most advantage out of this thing. You know how the origami world is, man. It always comes with a surprise. And it would have been so cool if these lined up like perfectly. And these line up, but not, you know, not perfect. Would have been nice. So yeah, thank you for joining. I'll see you on the next time. Let me get a nice screenshot here for the video. All right, cool. Well, catch you in the next time, guys. Take care. Bye-bye.